The airport was loud from the moment they walked inside. Wheels rolled across the floor, voices echoed from every direction, and screens blinked with flight numbers that kept changing. The young black girl stayed close to her mother as they moved through the long lines. Her mother held her phone tightly in one hand and their documents in the other. That phone was more than a device. It held pictures, messages, and reminders of everything they had been through together. They had been planning this trip for weeks. It was not meant to be stressful, but life had a way of testing people when they least expected it. The girl noticed how tired her mother looked. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her steps were slower than usual. Still, she smiled often, trying to make the journey feel light. After security, they finally reached their gate. People were already waiting, some sitting on the floor, others standing near the windows. The girl watched planes move slowly outside, their massive bodies gliding like silent giants. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Flying always felt strange to her, like trusting the sky to hold you up. When boarding was announced, the crowd rushed forward. The girl felt her mother's hand tighten around hers. They moved carefully, following the line into the plane. Inside, the air felt different. Cooler, quieter, but still full of small sounds. Overhead bins slammed shut. People searched for their seats. A baby cried somewhere behind them. They found their seats near the middle of the plane. The girl slid into the window seat, pressing her forehead against the glass. Her mother sat beside her, placing the phone gently on her lap. She checked it again, scrolling through something important. The girl did not ask what it was. She already knew that when her mother held the phone that way, it mattered. As passengers continued to board, a flight attendant walked up and down the aisle, checking bags and giving instructions. The girl noticed how quickly the attendant moved, how sharp her voice sounded. There was no smile, no warmth. Just short words and quick gestures. The plane doors closed with a heavy sound. A quiet tension filled the cabin. The girl sat up straight as the safety announcement began. She listened but also watched her mother, who seemed distracted. Her mother's eyes stayed on the phone, reading something again and again. Soon after, another flight attendant came down the aisle. She stopped near their row and looked directly at the phone in the mother's hand. Her tone was firm when she spoke, telling her that the phone needed to be put away. The mother nodded and said she would put it down in a moment. Her voice was calm, respectful. The girl felt a strange feeling in her chest. Something about the way the attendant stood there felt wrong. Too close. Too impatient. The mother lowered the phone slightly, still holding it, as if trying to finish reading one last line. That was when the moment changed. The attendant reached out suddenly. There was no warning, no explanation. She grabbed the phone from the mother's hand. Everything happened too fast. The girl's eyes widened as she watched the phone leave her mother's grasp. The attendant turned and walked away, and within seconds, the phone was gone. Discarded like it meant nothing. For a brief moment, no one spoke. The mother froze, her hand still in the position where the phone had been. Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The girl felt her heart start to pound. Passengers nearby looked up, then quickly looked away. Some pretended not to notice. Others shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but silent. The girl leaned toward her mother and whispered her name, but her mother did not respond. Her eyes were glossy, filled with shock and hurt. That phone carried pieces of her life. Pictures of loved ones. Messages saved for comfort. Important information they needed for the trip. And now it was gone. The girl felt something rise inside her. A heat she had never felt before. It was not just anger. It was protectiveness. She looked down the aisle, watching the attendant disappear behind a curtain. Her mother finally spoke, her voice barely audible. She asked where her phone had been taken. Another attendant passed by but did not answer clearly. Just a quick response that sounded practiced, empty. The girl sat back for a moment, trying to breathe. She looked around again. People were quiet. No one stepped in. No one said anything. She realized then that if she stayed silent, nothing would change. Her mother would stay quiet because she was tired, because she did not want trouble. But the girl was not tired. And she was not afraid. She reached for her mother's hand and squeezed it gently. Her mother looked at her, eyes full of worry and sadness. The girl gave her a small nod. A promise without words. Outside the window, the plane began to move slowly. The engines hummed louder. The journey had started, but something far more important was about to unfold. The girl sat up straight, her back firm against the seat. Her fear slowly turned into focus. She knew this was not just about a phone anymore. It was about respect. It was about being seen. And she was not going to let this moment pass quietly. As the plane rolled forward, the girl took one last look at her mother's empty hands. Then she turned her eyes toward the aisle, already preparing herself for what she would do next. The plane continued to move slowly along the runway, but inside the cabin, time felt frozen. The girl stayed alert, watching every movement around her. Her mother sat quietly beside her, hands folded together, staring at the seat in front of them. She looked smaller somehow, like the moment had taken something out of her. The girl leaned closer and spoke softly, telling her mother everything would be okay. Her mother nodded, but the worry in her eyes did not fade. She whispered that the phone had important things on it, things she could not afford to lose. The girl listened carefully, storing every word in her heart. A few minutes passed. The seatbelt sign turned on. A flight attendant's voice came over the speaker, calm and rehearsed. Nothing about the announcement matched what had just happened. It felt unfair, like the world had decided to move on without fixing what was wrong. The girl raised her hand slightly as another attendant walked by. She asked politely where her mother's phone had been taken. The attendant paused but did not give a clear answer. She said it was being handled and continued walking. That response only made the girl more uneasy. She noticed other passengers glancing at them now. Some looked curious. Others looked uncomfortable, as if they wanted to disappear into their seats. A man across the aisle shook his head quietly, but he said nothing. The silence felt heavy. The girl took a deep breath. She had always been taught to be respectful, to follow rules, to stay quiet in places like this. But she also knew respect worked both ways. What happened to her mother did not feel respectful at all. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up slowly. Her mother reached out, alarmed, asking her to sit back down. The girl gently placed her hand over her mother's and told her to trust her. Her voice was calm, but inside, her heart was racing. She stepped into the aisle and looked toward the front of the plane. The curtain that separated the cabin from the crew area hung still. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she started walking forward. Each step felt heavy, but also powerful. She could feel eyes following her. She stopped near the front and waited until the same flight attendant appeared. When she did, the girl spoke clearly, asking why her mother's phone had been taken and where it was now. The attendant looked surprised. She responded quickly, saying rules were rules and passengers needed to follow instructions. Her tone was sharp, defensive. The girl listened without interrupting, then calmly explained that her mother had not refused. She had simply needed a moment. The girl's words were simple, but they carried weight. She did not raise her voice. She did not insult or accuse. She only asked for fairness. The attendant seemed unsettled by the attention. Other crew members paused nearby. A few passengers leaned forward, listening closely. The girl could feel the shift in the room. She asked again where the phone was. This time, she added that it held important personal memories and information. She said it was not something that could be thrown away without care. Her voice shook slightly, but she kept going. The attendant hesitated. She said the phone had been placed away for safety reasons. The girl pointed out that no explanation had been given, and no warning. She said that taking something from someone without consent was not right. For a moment, no one spoke. The hum of the engines filled the silence. Then another flight attendant stepped in, older and calmer. She asked what was going on. The girl explained everything again, from start to finish. This time, she noticed people nodding. Someone quietly said the girl was right. The older attendant listened carefully and apologized for the confusion. She said she would look into it. That small acknowledgement felt like a crack of light. The girl returned to her seat, but she stayed standing for a moment, making sure her words had been heard. Her mother looked up at her, a mix of fear and pride in her eyes. As the plane lifted off, the girl finally sat down and buckled in. Her hands were shaking now that the moment had passed. Her mother squeezed her hand tightly, whispering thank you. The girl stared out the window as the ground fell away beneath them. She did not know how this would end. She did not know if the phone would be returned. But she knew one thing for sure. She had spoken up. And once you do that, you cannot go back to being silent. The flight climbed higher into the sky, carrying them forward, not just to their destination, but toward whatever came next. The seatbelt sign stayed on as the plane leveled out, but the feeling inside the cabin kept shifting. The girl sat still, eyes forward, listening to every sound. Her mother leaned back, trying to calm her breathing. The moment had passed, but the air still felt tight, like everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. A short while later, the older flight attendant returned. She stopped beside their row and spoke quietly. She said she had checked with the crew and needed a few minutes more. Her voice was softer than before. The girl nodded and thanked her. Even that small exchange felt different. It felt like progress. The girl noticed how people nearby were watching now without trying to hide it. A woman 2 rows ahead turned around and gave her a small, encouraging smile. Someone across the aisle whispered that it had not been right what happened earlier. These small signs of support made the girl feel less alone. Her mother leaned closer and asked if she was okay. The girl nodded, though her stomach still felt tight. She admitted she had been scared. Her mother told her that being scared did not mean being weak. It meant the moment mattered. The girl held on to those words. Drinks began to roll down the aisle on a cart. Normal flight routine slowly returned, but the girl stayed alert. She knew situations like this could easily be brushed aside if people stopped paying attention. She did not want that to happen. When the cart reached their row, the same flight attendant from earlier appeared again. She avoided eye contact at first, handing out cups quickly. The girl watched her carefully. When their eyes finally met, the attendant looked away. The girl spoke up, calmly asking for an update. Her voice was steady, even though her heart was beating fast. The attendant paused and said she would check again. There was no sharp tone this time. No rush. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The girl counted her breaths, trying to stay patient. Her mother rested her head against the seat, eyes closed, exhaustion written across her face. The girl felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had to see this through. Eventually, the older attendant returned, this time holding something wrapped in a small cloth. The girl's eyes locked onto it immediately. The attendant knelt beside the seat and carefully unwrapped the phone. Her mother gasped softly. The phone was there. Safe. The attendant apologized again, this time more clearly. She explained that the situation had been mishandled and that the phone should never have been taken without explanation. Her words were measured, sincere. She said the crew would review the incident. The girl listened closely. She thanked the attendant but also spoke honestly. She said moments like that could hurt people deeply, especially when they already felt small or ignored. She said respect should never feel optional. The attendant nodded. She said the girl was right. As the attendant walked away, the girl finally let her shoulders drop. Her mother held the phone with both hands, like she was holding something fragile and precious. She whispered thank you again, her voice shaking. Around them, a few passengers quietly clapped. It was not loud or dramatic, but it was real. The girl felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness, but from release. The rest of the flight felt different. Lighter. Conversations flowed more easily. The girl and her mother shared a small snack and talked softly about everyday things. Still, the girl kept replaying the moment in her mind, thinking about how close it had come to being ignored. She realized something important. Speaking up had not just helped her mother. It had reminded others that their voices mattered too. Silence only protects problems. Words create change. As the plane began its descent, the captain's voice filled the cabin. The girl looked out the window, watching the land rise up beneath them. She felt older somehow, changed by the experience. When the wheels touched the ground, the cabin filled with the sound of relief. People gathered their belongings. As they stood to leave, several passengers stopped to speak to the girl. They told her she had been brave. They told her they wished they had spoken up too. The girl smiled politely, a little overwhelmed. She did not feel like a hero. She had just done what felt right. As they stepped off the plane, her mother squeezed her hand tightly. She told her that courage often shows up quietly, in moments when no one expects it. The girl nodded, knowing she would carry this lesson with her. They walked into the airport together, blending into the crowd once more. But the girl knew that something important had happened up in the sky. Something that would stay with her long after the journey ended. And she knew this story was not over yet. The airport felt different after they stepped off the plane. It was still busy and loud, but the noise no longer pressed in on them the same way. The girl walked beside her mother, matching her pace, feeling a quiet strength settle in her chest. Her mother held the phone close, checking it again and again, as if making sure it was truly back. They moved through the terminal, following signs and crowds. The girl noticed how her mother's shoulders were no longer slumped. She looked tired, but lighter. Every few steps, she glanced at the girl with a soft smile, the kind that comes when words are not enough. As they waited near baggage claim, the girl replayed the flight in her mind. The moment the phone was taken. The silence that followed. The choice she made to stand up. She wondered how many people had been in situations like that and stayed quiet, not because they agreed, but because they felt powerless. Her mother spoke quietly, saying she had never expected her to do that. She said she had been afraid things would get worse if anyone spoke up. The girl listened carefully. She understood that fear. She felt it too. But she also knew that fear had almost cost them something important. The bags began to roll out. People rushed forward. The girl helped pull their luggage down, feeling useful, grounded. A few passengers from the flight passed by. Some nodded. One woman stopped and told the mother she had raised a strong child. The mother's eyes filled with tears. They left the airport and stepped into the open air. The sky was wide and bright. The girl took a deep breath, letting the cool breeze calm her nerves. She felt tired now, the kind of tired that comes after holding yourself together for a long time. During the ride away from the airport, her mother finally spoke more openly. She shared what had been on the phone. Messages from family. Photos from moments she never wanted to forget. Notes she kept to remind herself to keep going when life felt heavy. Losing it, even for a short time, had felt like losing pieces of herself. The girl listened, her throat tight. She realized then how much adults carried quietly. How often they protected others while forgetting to protect themselves. That night, after they settled in, the girl lay awake thinking. The room was quiet except for distant sounds outside. She thought about the flight attendant's face when she spoke up. Not angry, just surprised. Like she had not expected resistance. The girl wondered how many times people acted without thinking because no one challenged them. The next morning, her mother mentioned she wanted to report what happened. Not out of anger, but because it mattered. The girl agreed. She said it was important that the airline knew how the situation felt from the other side. They sat together and wrote everything down. Every detail. The words came slowly at first, then faster. The girl helped describe the moment from her view. She focused on how it made her mother feel, not just what happened. When they finished, her mother thanked her again. She said courage did not always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looked like a calm voice refusing to accept unfairness. The days that followed were quiet. Life returned to its normal rhythm. School. Chores. Small conversations. But the girl noticed something had changed inside her. She paid more attention to how people were treated around her. She spoke up when something felt wrong, even in small ways. One afternoon, while sitting together, her mother received a message from the airline. They acknowledged the incident and apologized. They said they would review staff procedures and provide additional training. It was not a perfect solution, but it was something. Her mother showed the message to the girl. They shared a quiet moment of relief. The girl felt proud, not because she had one, but because her voice had made a difference. Later that evening, they talked about respect. About how it should never depend on who you are or where you sit. The girl realized that what happened on the plane was part of a bigger picture, one that many people faced every day. She understood now that courage was not about being fearless. It was about acting even when fear was present, about choosing to protect dignity, even in uncomfortable spaces. As the night grew quiet, the girl felt a sense of peace. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more moments that tested her voice. But she also knew she would not forget this one. Somewhere high above the clouds, a small moment had changed the way she saw herself and the world. And that change would carry her forward, long after the flight was just a memory. Time passed, but the memory of that flight never fully faded. It did not sit heavy anymore. Instead, it rested quietly in the girl's mind, like a lesson waiting to be used again. Life moved on, but she moved through it differently now. Back at school, the girl noticed small things she might have ignored before. The way some voices were heard more quickly than others. The way certain people stayed silent even when something felt unfair. She did not see herself as someone special, but she knew she could not pretend not to notice anymore. One afternoon, she saw another student being spoken to harshly over something small. People nearby watched but said nothing. The girl felt that familiar tight feeling in her chest. She remembered the plane, the aisle, her mother's empty hands. She stepped forward and spoke calmly, asking for patience and understanding. The moment passed without drama, but it mattered. When she got home, her mother noticed the change in her. She asked gentle questions, and the girl shared what had happened. Her mother listened closely, then smiled. She said growth often shows up quietly, one choice at a time. The phone incident came up again one evening when they were looking through old photos together. Her mother paused on a picture and laughed softly, saying she was glad it had not been lost. The girl watched her face, seeing how much those memories meant. She understood now that standing up for someone was also standing up for their history. Weeks later, another message arrived from the airline. They explained changes they were making and thanked them for bringing the issue forward respectfully. The girl read the message twice. It felt strange knowing that something she had done in a moment of fear and determination had reached beyond that plane. Her mother printed the message and placed it in a drawer, not as proof, but as a reminder. A reminder that voices mattered, even when they shook. The girl did not talk about the flight often. She did not need to. But sometimes, when she felt unsure of herself, she returned to that memory. She remembered how small she felt at first, and how that feeling did not stop her. As seasons changed, the world brought new challenges. Some were small. Some felt overwhelming. But each time, the girl faced them with a little more confidence. She learned when to speak and when to listen. She learned that courage did not mean winning every time. It meant trying. Her relationship with her mother grew deeper. They talked more openly. They laughed more easily. The girl realized that moment on the plane had not only protected her mother. It had brought them closer. One night, as they sat together in a quiet room, her mother asked her a simple question. She asked what made her stand up that day. The girl thought for a moment, then said she did not want her mother to feel alone. Her mother hugged her tightly, holding on longer than usual. Years would pass, and many details of that flight would blur. The sounds, the faces, the exact words. But the feeling would stay. The feeling of choosing action over silence. The girl grew older, but that part of her never disappeared. She carried it into new places, new situations, new relationships. She understood that fearlessness was not something you are born with. It is something you practice. Sometimes, she wondered about the people on that plane. Whether they remembered the moment. Whether it changed anything for them. She hoped it did, even in small ways. Life continued, full of noise and movement, much like the airport where the journey began. But now, the girl walked through it with her head held a little higher. She had learned that respect is not given only when requested politely. Sometimes it must be claimed calmly, firmly, and without apology. And though the world would test her again, she knew one thing for certain. She would not stay silent when it mattered. That lesson, born high above the clouds, stayed with her long after the plane had landed.